So I guess there may be some misunderstanding because Liza. Oh, Matt, you're here.
Hello.
Okay.
So we apologies, Lisa and I. We saw there was a different link in our, for some reason in the meeting invite we had organized for us to be on the call. There was a different Zoom link than the one that's in the community post, and we clicked the one in the calendar thinking they were the same, but they weren't. So we've been sitting in another meeting room.
Okay, great. Hi.
How's it going?
So thanks for alerting us. All right. So we have a whole group today. That's awesome. Maybe we can do just a very quick round of introductions, since I think most people haven't spoken with each other before. I'll go first. I'm Lisa Kaywood, L. Kaywood. And I'm leading the community management part of the project. Matt, why don't you go next?
Yeah, I'm Matt Oswalt. I built a lot of this stuff from a technical perspective, and that's sort of my role going forward. Is a lot of the project management curriculum stuff. I'm letting Derek and Lisa handle. If you have any questions about the platform Antidote specifically, that's more the thing that I'm focusing on lately. So that's what I do.
I'm Greg Farrow from Packet Pushers. I'm that guy, I guess. So I just dropped in to see what's happening.
I'm Brian Linkletter. I just have an interest in network simulation in general, write a blog about it, and have already posted a few things about NRE Labs.
Hi, I'm Johannes. I'm a software engineer. I just looked into the open source project and looking into it. Just popped in to see. Thanks.
Hey guys, I don't know if you can hear my microphone. Can anyone hear me?
Yes.
Okay, so me and Juwari are working on a lesson for NRE. We are interns at Juniper, and this was kind of one of our projects to work on a lesson. So we were just joining to see what's going on, and we're trying to get some help with one of our problems we're having, and thought this was a good opportunity to jump on the call and see what's happening.
Sweet.
I'm Aubergix, Olivia. I'm more interested in architecture of the platform and Antidote than in curriculum, and I'm just a recent contributor. And I'm in Dublin today.
Yes, talking about the project from what I understand. Thank you.
Yeah.
And have we hit everybody's Slimfire? Do we hear from Slimfire? All right, Slimfire remains mute. All right. Let's see. I think we're going to swap the agenda a little bit. We'll kick it off with Matt talking about the upcoming next release or two, and kind of what he is looking at doing, sort of in the context of our priorities for the project overall. And we'll go from there.
Just, Liza, is the meeting going to be recorded and published like last time?
Yeah, it is being recorded right now.
Okay, so everybody knows. Maybe it's better to warn in advance.
Yeah.
Okay, so I'll show some of the things that I've been thinking about. One of the things that I need to do in the very near future is clean up a lot of the notes that I've taken about the things that I want to do in the next few releases. We've had a lot of in the last month or so, especially, we've had a lot of like interrupting events. Like I went on PTO for a week. There's a few things that made it this next release sort of like fall behind a little bit. One of those things I'm working on right now, which I'll talk to because it's not really part of any release plan, but it's very necessary for NRA Labs, the site, is we're actually moving hosting providers. This is one of the things that's been taking my attention lately. Right now we're in Google Cloud. We were originally in Google Cloud because we had a lot of we looked at a lot of different providers, and Google Cloud seemed to be the only one that allowed us to enable nested virtualization, which is necessary for performance reasons. Turns out that those performance reasons weren't good enough. For some of the things that we need to be able to do, nested virtualization of any kind is really just a killer. So we started shopping around and found a bare metal as a service provider that's very good. And we're currently moving the infrastructure that we run on GCP over to this provider. Now that's not really super relevant to the open source project. It's kind of where we're running it. But I say that because first off, everything that we build, that all of like the Terraform definitions and all of that power it, that make it possible to move over, those are already open source, and they will continue to be open source. So if you're interested in that, the Antidote Ops repo is where all that lives and will live. I also want to mention that because that's a pretty big undertaking, and it's taking a lot of my attention. So if there's a delay on pull requests, that's why. So that's something I wanted to mention. Let's see. Yeah, I'll share my screen in 1 second. Bookmarks. There we go. So there's a few things, a few resources you should be aware of. I will caveat this once again saying I need to clean this up, but the places that the things that I'm about to show you, the resources I'm about to show you will stay around, and they'll be good for you to know about. Because I'm not sure if everybody knows about the way that I normally organize projects. Share desktop. So underneath the network reliability engineering organization, if you just go to that on GitHub, github.com/NRA learning, you'll notice there are all of our, I've pinned sort of the 6 most popular repos that we have that powers the project. If you go to the projects tab, you'll see basically like a Trello board. If you're familiar with Trello, it's kind of what it looks like, or rather you'll see a list of boards. The only board that we have right now is 0.4.0. So this is the next version of the platform. And what I normally do is when we release a new version of the platform, or really right before, I'll create the next releases board and start moving issues to it, so that we can do some like light release planning. Now, I've mostly been doing this in isolation, it's been, I've been doing it in the open, it's been public, but it's been an effort that, I sort of do myself. And instead, what we want to do is obviously make that more of a community-informed thing. I'm happy to lead that, continue to lead that. But one of the things that I wanted to do on this call is let you guys know about it so that you can see it and provide feedback. Hey, like I think this feature should be worked on in this release, and so on and so forth. And so normally, basically the way that this is very commonly done, and this is a very common pattern, by the way, for release planning. I've been doing this all kinds of different open source projects that use this kind of format. In Trello especially, is effectively you put all of the issues or tasks that you need to accomplish in a given release over here in to do. You might have a couple different to do columns based on what kind of work it is, and effectively you'll move things from left to right based on where they are in the process. Now, like I said, I have a lot of cards in here that are just notes. I really need to clean this up. And a lot of this stuff is actually already done. And then, of course, I have all these PRs that I'm sort of working on in parallel, which is also something I should finish up. But so keep that in mind. A lot of this will get cleaned up, but this is useful to know because this is basically what's in my head with respect to what's going to be put into the next release. So yeah, that's something to be aware of. Now, if you want to zoom out just a little bit, a good way of knowing what's on the longer term roadmap will be this doc that I've been putting together. Same situation as before, meaning this is not super cleaned up right now and it needs to have more details added to it. But I'm hoping by next week, I'll be able to send this out and actually get like feedback because it'll be, you know, not finished because it's going to be a living document. As you can see, we have releases planned out through the rest of the year, or at least placeholders for the rest of the year. So it's not like it'll be finished, but there will be enough information for everybody to know sort of what's going to happen in the very least at the next, you know, for the next 2 releases of the platform. So if you go to you know, this doc, and like I said, I'll send it out at some point in the future. But the really main thing is you know, you've got this sort of like high level release planning section. So in many ways, you've got 0.4.x, for instance. You'll notice that a lot of the things discussed here will be contained either within this plan. Sorry, wrong tab. This plan, or a subsequent plan that's focused on 0.4.0, something like that. So basically, you can treat this as like the master document, which says here are the high-level things, the really important things that we need to accomplish in each release, or that the community has made clear we should accomplish in a given release. From this document, what I'll do is I'll derive a very detailed release plan for a specific release version, so 0.4.0. This version this plan will include those things, but it'll also include other things too. This doc is not meant to track all of like the GitHub issues for like bugs and things like that. It's mostly meant to just contain like high level goals. Here are the things that we really, really want to have done by this release. And so naturally those things, as well as all of the other specific issues for bugs and whatnot, will be contained in this plan, and we'll be tracking that as we go through. Once all of the boxes are moved to the right, the release is more or less ready, and we will run the release workflow, and then everybody will get the new version. And then at some point in the future, we'll update the actual NRA Labs site to use it. Typically what we do in terms of scheduling, again, none of this is super formalized, but just as a matter of, you know, sort of past procedure, normally what we do is we release. That's very easy to do. We have a set of StackStorm workflows to do that. So we'll just release VO.4.0, for instance. And what we'll do is we'll release that to our PTR site. So if you don't know about that, it's like a little testing site, ptr.labs.networkreliability.engineering. And you can test the new version of the platform and actually the curriculum if we released a curriculum version with that. And we'll sort of test that for about a week. And then once everybody's pretty comfortable that it works, we'll just flip the bit. We'll tell production to use the new version. So a little bit mixed in there with like NRA, the way we run NRA Labs and the project Antidote, but I think it's necessary because it's, you know, NRA Labs obviously is like one of the best ways to test the platform Antidote because it's, you know, it's what we put up there. So but in terms of releasing the project, that's sort of the plan.
Okay, so there are a couple of comments in the chat. One cool. From Brian, and then if you could just dive into a little bit more detail about the .4 release.
Sure. Cool, I'll start with Brian's. Overjix, you said something about, it seems relevant to me if one wants to host Antidote on premises. Oh, is that when I was talking about the bare metal stuff?
Sure.
Okay, yeah. I remember. Okay, yeah, I do. I remember. I remember what I was talking about. Yeah, the everything we build from an infrastructure perspective, whether it's VMs, even physical servers, we do everything as code, meaning Terraform or Ansible, depending on what we're configuring. But regardless, no matter what, when we stand something up from an infrastructure perspective, this isn't really part of the Antidote platform, but we do everything as Terraform or Ansible configurations. And then we open source. That's all in the Antidote Ops repo. So yeah, to your point, if people do want to replicate what we're doing, or at least get inspiration from that, you know, they're more than welcome to do so. Brian says, I'd love to know more about the performance issues related to nested virtualization. So I don't have specific numbers, like we didn't do any benchmarking or anything like that. But there are a few things that are made a lot worse when you start thinking about some of the software that's sort of been, I guess, like forced into a virtual form factor, if you will. Any performance penalty, it seems, is really bad. Just take for instance the VQFX, which by the way isn't a Juniper product. We don't. That's not something that we support as like a please put this in your hypervisor and run production traffic through it. We have other things for that like VMX and whatnot, but the VQFX specifically is more meant as really just a learning tool, really, because we don't support it as an official product, at least not right now. Anyway, the way that that's built is there's like a component called I don't know a ton about this, but what I do know is there's a component like the VPFE, which we're going to be releasing a new version of that in the near future. That's a lot better, but the current version is pretty slow. And every time we try to start that, frankly, in the current environment, it takes about 5 to 10 extra minutes beyond the VQFX itself booting. So if you can think of like the control plane element, that's the element that currently runs on all the current VQFXs, and that itself doesn't boot super quickly. It maybe takes 5 minutes or so. But the benefit of that portion is we can health check it. So we can send pings basically to the TCP sockets that we know are supposed to be responding, and use that to determine whether or not the thing has come up. Problem is the PFE isn't like that. The PFE is separate. It's running inside the container, but we can't access it directly. And so we'll bring the lesson up because all of the other health checks passed, but then the line card won't be there. Like the XE ports just won't exist for like the first 5 to 10 minutes of the lesson being available, which is not great. So one of many things that we're doing to address that is moving to a bare metal provider. It's not the only consideration, by the way. There's actually a bunch of reasons why a bare metal provider is just going to work out better for us, I think. That's not to say it won't work in VMs. It certainly will. In fact, that's how we've done it the whole time. So it clearly works. It's just we're optimizing at this point for the actual NRE Labs site. But Antidote itself obviously doesn't care about any of that. Oberjic says, could Matt describe the 2 items in the 0.4 in the document? Yes, I can. So again, there's some additional synchronization work that I need to do to make sure that this document is properly synced with the 0.4 plan. Hopefully by the end of this week, this doc as well as the 0.4 plan will be cleaned back up. But I'll talk to the two here. Now, notice in this doc, I talk about 0.4.x. Because I don't want to get into like really specific patch versions in this doc. I'm mostly just talking about minor versions. So just FYI. And the reason I bring that up is not all of these will be shown in this page right now. Some of them are, but others aren't. So because I might be waiting until like 0.4.1, for instance. But of course, all of this is totally flexible. We can change this based on need. So the first thing is collections. Collections is done. Collections has been done for a while and live on PTR. I don't remember what state I left PTR in. There's no guarantee that it's actually working, so it might not work, but I'll give it a shot. So collections are pretty cool. Cool, looks like they do. So collections are pretty cool. We had a need. We had a few different seemingly unrelated needs actually. A while back that it's been on our minds for a while, and we solved it with this, or at least we think we have a pretty good feeling about how we've solved it with this. Few things. First off, we want for a lot of lessons there needs to be additional context. Like one of the things, like any lesson that we put in that's got slightly more like Juniper leaning focused technology, what we want to do is make sure that people are aware of that. We don't. Just out of desire to keep the spirit of NRE Labs sort of what it is, multi-vendor, we don't try to, we don't do anything like a sales pitch or anything like that. I'm not talking about like we're showing off like some proprietary Juniper technology and that. That's not included in what I'm talking about here. Let me talk about a very specific example. The current there's a lesson on JSnappy. So JSnappy is an open source project, so it's not something we're trying to like sell or push or anything like that. It's just a cool project that we helped start that we want to talk about. However, it is Juniper only. The way the project works, it is Juniper only. And even though it's open source, we want to make sure people have that context. So anytime there's like a slightly more Juniper leaning like content, we want to make sure it's in the Juniper collection so that people are aware of that. But that's not the only use case that surfaced from this. Another use case simply is, hey, you know, maybe I'm running a consultancy and I have a bunch of people that I have put on creating content for NRA Labs. Like we have a bunch of automation people that have a bunch of scripts that are really awesome and we want to share that with the world. Meaning, you know, Matt, I would love to be able to highlight that effort, not just show the lessons, but give people some context around where those lessons came from. Like for instance, we have a bunch of partners here. Let's say Network to Code. Everybody, hopefully is familiar with Network to Code. If they put a bunch of people on creating lessons, which, a lot of them are thinking about doing this. They put a bunch of people on creating lessons. I want to make sure that that people are aware of the context of where that came from. And as a result, Network to Code gets the sort of the credit for that. So the way that we've done this for collections is there's an optional field within each lesson definition where you can say, hey, this is part of collection 2 or 3 or whatever the idea is, just like lesson IDs kind of. And then there's a collection definition also in the curriculum repo that defines all of this text and these images and whatnot. And the cool thing is what it'll do is it'll provide a little badge on the lesson that you can click on, just like I clicked on it here. And it'll take you to this sort of like highlight overview page for that collection. In this case, the company Network to Code. And then any lesson that they tag with that collection ID will automatically be populated here. I'll click on the Juniper collection so you can see that in action. Because we do have obviously like the PyEZ lesson. It looks like I need to tag the JSnappy lesson too. I haven't done that yet, but I did tag the PyEZ lesson. So that's kind of how it shows here. So if you just want to see all of the lessons that Juniper sort of sponsors, quote unquote, then you can click this. Same thing applies to any other collection though. And you can see we have collections for all kinds of folks. Now this is a testing site, so not all of the folks on this list know about this actually. A lot of them do, but some of them we just put up as sort of a mock. So this will look very different on the production side. We want to make sure collections are only live if like there's stuff in them. But this is a good example. And Greg, we have a packet pushers. Like I said, this is a test site. We threw something up here. The packet pushers are awesome sauce, full stop, man. Okay, I am a brown noser, damn.
Yeah, some days. We try hard to be worthy.
Yeah. Anyway, so that's collections. And as you can see, it's basically done. There's a few things that I want to do. I don't think there is currently, we don't show a badge on the lesson. So if you go to a lesson and it happens to be in a collection, what I would like to have is that there's a badge that says that, like, hey, I'm in collection, whatever. I don't think that's done. So I need to do that. But mostly the collections feature is in place. So yeah, basically it's just like an organizational tool, if you can think of it that way.
Yeah, so this actually goes a little bit, and we'll talk about this a little bit more later, but as we think about opportunities for sponsoring the project, we have a couple of organizations potentially interested in that. One of the things that we've been thinking about is, so right now I think that the collections feature is organized basically alphabetically. But one of the benefits of being a sponsor could be, for example, moving up in the list or being highlighted in some fashion as sort of one of the benefits of being a sponsor. So that's this is something that's been of interest, especially to a lot of VARs and systems integrators who have found their way to the project. Just because they want a way to be able to highlight the things that they do and also easily find the things that they do as ways to showcase their own DevOps practices. So that was sort of the genesis of this feature, but there are I think additional ways that the project itself can can make use of the collections feature from that standpoint, from the sponsorship standpoint.
Yeah. I'm looking at the other things here. There are things we can talk about, but to be honest, like I said, this needs to get cleaned up, and a lot of these might shift around just because 0.4.x is kind of overdue. So if you have feedback on what you think should be there, feel free to just send it to me. That's fine. Because like I said, I created this about a month ago, or maybe even 2 months ago. So it definitely needs to be updated before I share it out, and I will do that. But in the meantime, if you're like, man, I'm looking at, say, this plan, and I just don't see something that I think is important, just send me a note. I'll put it in the doc. That's fine. A lot of this just needs to get cleaned up. It's not, a lot of the stuff that's here isn't here because I think very strongly that it should be. It's just a placeholder mostly. So I'll clean it up. If you have any feedback on the specifics, let me know. I know Oberjix and a few others are interested in the architecture. And if you do look at the doc, one of the things you'll see is that underneath the timeline, which is a little less detailed, you'll see a section called mini projects, which is way more detailed. So one of the reasons why the timeline is a little messy right now is because I focused less on when things will happen and more on what needs to happen. Because I think that that's a little more important right now, because I just want to disambiguate that. One of which is a fairly high impact change to Syringe. I will not use the rest of the time of this meeting to discuss it, because I think there's other things that I'd like to get to from the rest of you on the call. I know that there's some thoughts that some of you might want to share, but I just want to provide a teaser on this because I'm gonna be going into a lot more detail on this later. But in short, if you're familiar with the way that, or if you're not familiar with the way that Syringe is currently built, and actually, if you're not familiar with Syringe, let me quickly define it. So Antidote is like an umbrella project, right? Antidote is sort of the collection of everything that we built to make this possible. Anytime you talk about the platform, you're talking about Antidote. Specifically, if you look behind the scenes, you'll see that there is one really important component, which is called Syringe. And if you've built a lesson, you know what Syringe is, because that's what sort of gobbles up the lesson definition and makes it possible. The way Syringe is built is it's currently all in one program. So every bit of code that goes into Syringe ends up in a single binary that runs on your laptop in Self-Medicate, which is Minikube, which uses Minikube. Or in the case of production, a real Kubernetes cluster. But in either case, Syringe itself is just a single binary. One of the things that one of the benefits, there's actually a lot of benefits to that, and we did this for a pretty good reason. It's easy to manage. So there's just a single binary. You throw it on a server and you call it a day. It provided us with agility. So we built all of this basically in like 4 months. Prior to launch, and this is probably one of the reasons we were able to do that, is because it was very simple. There's also no external database because we just kept everything in memory, and so it's just a very simple architecture. There are two components to that. Even though it's a single binary, there are two sort of subsystems within that running process: the API and the scheduler. So if you can think of the API as what's presented to the front end. That's sort of what the web front end consumes to know what lessons are available and when, and what lessons are what with the lesson catalog basically. So all the detail about what's loaded into Syringe is available via API. And then on the back end we have the scheduler portion, which runs in parallel to the API, and that's responsible for talking to Kubernetes. So you call the API and say, hey, like I would like an instance of lesson 1, for instance. What it'll do is it'll say, cool, well, I know the scheduler knows about lesson ID 1, and I know that it has these components. So I'm going to fire that message off to the scheduler, and the scheduler is going to then turn around and fire a message off to Kubernetes to spin up all of the actual containers to make it possible. So those are the two subsystems within the current Syringe architecture. It's one binary. It's managed as one binary, just called Syringe D. But there are two subsystems within that. And again, I'm going to clean this up so that it's a lot more clear. But one of the things we're going to be doing, or one of the things we thought about is some of the disadvantages to this model that we're starting to see. First off, it is a single point of failure. So if you noticed, I think I wrote a blog back in like October or November, right after we launched. If you look at the Grafana graphs for lesson utilization, you'll see that there were times right after launch that that there was a bunch of people using it, and then all of a sudden it went to zero. A bunch of people using it just went to zero. There's a lot of trade-offs that we made in the very early days with respect to how quickly we wanted this to run, and because it's a single point of failure, if it crashes for any reason, of course, it brings the whole thing down. Now, normally that wouldn't be a big deal because Kubernetes will restart it, but because there's no external database, all that state is kept within the binary. If it restarts, then it's gone. That state is gone. However, Kubernetes has its own state. And so because we don't want those two things to become out of sync, what we do when we start Syringe is we actually kill all of the namespaces in Kubernetes that exist, just to make sure there's nothing that Syringe doesn't know about. Now, of course, we're 6 or 7 or more months down the road, and a lot of those bugs have been fixed. So now it's not a huge deal, but it's still something we don't want to remain, we don't want to leave in place. We don't want it to be a single point of failure. We'd like it to be much more stateless and much more distributed. Because the API and the scheduler are kind of tightly coupled together, adding logic to this and adding extensibility to this is actually pretty difficult. There's 2 ways to do that. You could either pass all of the state you possibly need to make an extension up through the API. That's possible. But there are other ways to do that I've actually used in other projects that I think might be better. Yeah, I talked about the rest of the disadvantages. So I will clean this up and go through a lot more detail, but I just wanted to really quickly tease what's coming. This is a distributed sort of microservices architecture that's pretty popular, actually. I used this is the architecture that we used at StackStorm, which is also pictured here. So I'm trying not to be super confusing. StackStorm will have a role in this architecture with respect to adding functionality to things like our support site or our community site or our Discord, that kind of thing. But forget about that for now. This is more or less sort of aside from the point. For now, what I want you to look at is the rest of the components here. You've got basically a bunch of different processes that have one very specific job instead of one process that has all the jobs. And so that's a pretty common model. What we're going to do basically is move all of the state out of Syringe itself. And there's not a lot. We're still going to we're not going to like make you go through like a web UI to generate lesson definitions or anything like that. All of that's still going to be done as code with YAML files, stored in Git. All of that's going to be preserved. However, the state for like what is running in that moment will be managed by an external database. So that we don't have to rely on any one particular component to hold that data in memory. Same thing applies, by the way, right now to time series data. So usage data is also exported today in InfluxDB. Now, the way that this will work is we'll break all of the different jobs that we currently have that one process doing. We'll break that into different components. So the API will be its own component. It'll be totally stateless, which is why you see 3 copies of it. So we'll be able to spin up 3 copies of the API. If one were to crash for whatever reason, or the server on which that process is running would crash, whatever, the others would be able to continue. Same thing with the scheduler. Those are the 2 really very vital components that we want to make sure are sort of always available. But there are other components, like for instance, stats. We want to be able to export stats, and we kind of just want that to be in its own process so that we can manage that sort of very simply. Same thing with garbage collection. There's really not a need for garbage collection to be done as part of the scheduler. It's kind of separate thing. We just need some process to sit in the background and look to see if there are any old lessons, and if there are, kill them. Pretty straightforward.
Hey, Matt, there's a question on what's NATS.
Yeah, so NATS is you can think of it like a message queue. It's a very fast, very simple message queue. So if you've used something like RabbitMQ, I would caution you against comparing it because it'll look kind of bad in comparison. The trade-off is simplicity for speed. And the features that NATS has is perfectly fine for our use case. RabbitMQ is I've used it before. It's a fine message queue. It's just very heavy-handed because it does all the things. One of the things it does is it provides like temporary storage for messages. It allows you to like store messages for like a long period of time. We don't need to do that. So there are a lot of features like that that we just don't need out of that. Nats happens to be super, super fast, and it has all the features we need to be able to pass messages between these processes. So that's how they talk. There will be a Nats service running in Kubernetes that allows you to tie these things together. And of course, naturally, we'll make sure all of this gets replicated to self-medicate as we do today. So we'll modify self-medicate to make sure all this stuff gets stood up so you don't have to worry about it. The key here is because we've split everything apart, all of the way that Syringe works is now exposed on this message queue. The way that these components talk is no longer like in memory and like opaque. It's all exposed on this message queue. So if we had, for instance, if we wanted to place, if we wanted to do something with really Antidote or Syringe specifically, like extending it or adding maybe additional metadata to what's going on, anything really, and any sort of extensibility to the platform, we could simply build it to listen on this message queue for data. And you can do basically whatever you need to do with that data. The data is all exposed on the message queue. So by forcing these components to talk over a message queue, you can then attach anything else to that message queue and it picks up that data and you can do whatever you want with it. Now, one of the examples, like I said, one such example of that is we have a bunch of, sort of community resources for folks to sort of get, to be able to communicate. One of the things is adding the idea of badges in the community site, the discourse forum that we stood up. There's actually a concept of badges within that site. We've been playing with the idea of maybe awarding badges based on completed lessons or maybe contributed lessons. That would be kind of cool. One of the ways that we know one of the ways in this model that we'll know if somebody completed a lesson is there will be a message that's sent out on the message queue that says so-and-so completed this lesson. And what we can do is we can hook StackStorm up to that, to the message queue, and then build workflows that do all kinds of stuff, award badges. We can even call out to like Twilio and have it like call you on your phone and congratulate you. Like there's all kinds of stuff you can do there.
That would be really annoying.
It would be kind of annoying. It would be kind of annoying. So anyway, we're putting more thought into what we want to put on here, but the general architecture of Syringe is what I wanted to clue everybody up about. I will go into much more detail in the future, but I did want to talk a little bit about it now, just because I've been sitting on this for a little bit and I'm tired of sitting on it.
Yeah, so there is a request in the chat. You'll see to publish the Google Doc, preferably not as a Google Doc, so that people can kind of dive into it and think about it a little bit more carefully.
Yeah, it'll get out there.
Any idea when?
No idea when. Sometime this week for sure.
Okay, I'm putting that in the notes.
Okay.
Okay. Let's see. So, given what folks have kind of heard from Matt so far, one of the things that Matt and I have been talking about is how we kind of start to peel off the pieces of the development from Matt and kind of help the community start actively contributing to the development, so we can move this all forward all along together. I'd like thoughts from the folks on this call, and maybe Matt can comment on sort of what you need from Matt to kind of start understanding how to start getting engaged.
Documentation. We could use information about how, number one, how to create images, or what are the requirements for an image, and I know there's those new changes. I looked at that the video you made yesterday, and I see these new changes coming, which are really required to use it in a better way, at least in my use case. And once those are implemented, some documentation helps us use that. But especially around images, I don't think there's enough in your docs about how to create an image specifically for NRE labs.
Okay.
More documentation.
Other topics besides the ones that Brian mentioned?
The configuration steps, maybe, which are a bit opaque.
Sorry, somebody's really muffled.
Aubergix here was mentioning, more documentation about the configurator, the step after the deployment of the VMs or the pods.
Okay.
Just to be clear, you're talking about the changes we're making right now to the endpoint stuff, making sure that's documented.
Well, I didn't watch the yesterday video, so I don't know. But it wasn't clear at the moment. But it's a complement to Brian's comment, I guess. So how to make images and what happened to images once they are deployed.
Got it. Okay.
Okay.
Yeah, I think with the changes you're making, like you're planning to make, you're getting really close to something that's generally usable by everybody, and you just making it possible for people to make that last connection to getting it working is going to get everybody. Well, once your changes are made, is going to make this a tool that I think more people can contribute to.
Yeah.
Okay.
And you if one has to pick, because Matt is basically one person, would we say full speed ahead with more work on the platform, or slow things down and get the documentation right? Like if we have to prioritize, what comes first?
It's probably the work on the Go code, and which can not easily be done by someone that's not aware of the details, or all the Kubernetes specific details. Because one can try and document without much knowledge if you just look how things are looking. But debugging the Go code, yes.
Yeah, I think getting what Matt talked about yesterday, actually, like available in self-medicate, for example, would be number one, and then documenting how we can get our own images into it would be number two. Pretty close, but I think 1 and 2.
Okay, so what Matt talked about yesterday would be, I'm sorry, you said getting it into Antidote.
Yeah.
Okay, and then documenting, I'm sorry, what was the second thing?
Documenting how to create your own image. Like for example, you've got a Juniper router in a Docker container. I want to put another router in a Docker container and put it into self-medicate. And I don't know how to do that. And I'm a beginner with Docker and things like that. So think about your audience. They're not necessarily going to be Docker experts. So a little bit of extra help there would be good too.
Okay.
So me and Juaria went through that process of not sure how to build the Docker containers, and also not sure how to push them into the platform. So we could make kind of what we went through and how we eventually did it in the end as the basis of the documentation, if that's useful.
And is that did you when you went through that, did you document that and share that?
We didn't document anything or share anything. We were just trying to figure out
Just trying to hack through it.
trying to hack through it, figure out, because I think what our understanding was from what we could see online was, oh, it's a simple process. You should know how to do this. But it's good to hear that other people went through that. And the process is really quite simple. Once you have it, at least my understanding is it's just pulling it from your Docker storage into the Minikube environment, and then your image can be used. So I can write a quick document on that and send it to Matt if it's useful.
So Matt, is it better for him to send it to you or to post it somewhere?
Well, certainly, you hold on. Am I on mute? No, I'm not. Okay. I mean, all of our documentation is hosted in the Antidote repo. So if you wanted to submit a PR changing the docs, you're more than welcome to do that. I'll review it just like anything else. If you don't want to do that and you have something, that you've already built, like maybe in a Google Doc of like notes you've taken, we can do like a quick Zoom call and I'll walk you through converting that to the docs format. That's fine too.
Okay, that would be good. I will try and sort out a document on this sometime this week, which just outlines the process. And then it would be good to talk with you how you would like, because I've never gone through that process of pushing it. All of that. So it'd be good to have one-on-one to see if this for the future as well.
And please do take a peek at the Antidote repo because that's where the docs are right now. In fact, that's kind of the only thing that's in that repo now. We moved things around, so the only thing that's actually in the Antidote repo is the docs folder.
Okay, I will have a look at that one as well.
Would it be hard to rename that repo?
No, the reason we have it there, the reason it's called Antidote is because we also have all of the Git submodules there. So instead of renaming it, if we wanted docs to be in its own repo, I'd rather just move the docs folder.
I think that might be helpful and worthwhile to make it just easier to find.
That's fine. We can do that. The reason the Antidote repo is there is originally a little bit of a history lesson. This is more than a year ago. When we first started the project, we actually had all code in the Antidote repo. And now there's like no code in the Antidote repo. So that's why that exists. To sort of keep things as simple as possible, we're continuing to point to the Antidote repo, but instead of having all the code there, we just add all of the Git submodules for the various little sub projects there. That way people can find it. Docs was like the last directory that survived. So we can move that elsewhere too. That's fine. We'll do like Antidote docs or something.
Hey, I have a suggestion, Matt. When you get together with Mr. Todd, just if assuming that you're both open to it, just record that discussion where you're showing him how to put things into the documentation repo, so that other people can learn how to put things in the documentation repo.
Yeah, that's totally fine. Yeah, we'll record that and publish it.
Okay. All right.
And then the images documentation, I'll as soon as the endpoints work is finished, I'll turn my attention to getting that the images documentation. Well, it exists, but it's not sufficient, clearly. So I can actually send that link out. This is where it will be. I know where it will be because the page exists. It just needs more data. It needs more info. So in the chat, Brian especially, you're probably interested in this. That's what I have thus far. Obviously, it needs to be expanded, but it does exist. So the good news is when I do expand it, that's where it will be. So feel free to bookmark that.
All right. So we have 5 minutes left on the call. I didn't really have anything on the sort of marketing community front really today. I hope to have more next week. Are there any other comments or questions for Matt? I know there was one person who mentioned questions with regard to creating a lesson. Any other questions that we should talk about today?
I just have one question for I need to get in contact with the guy on the forum who's called Cloud Toad. It's Derek, and I'm not sure if he's in the Slack or what's the best way to contact him. Or if
lots of different ways to do it. You can definitely do it on Discord or Discourse. You can also email him. It's D Winkworth, DWI. I'll put it in the chat. Email him as well.
Okay, perfect. If you put that in the chat, because he's going to help us with the problem we're having. So hopefully we'll get some time on him tomorrow.
Okay. Find my way back to the window that I was just in. There we go.
Fantastic. Thank you.
And he has a Gmail account too, and I just don't remember offhand what it is.
That's okay. Well, I'm also a Juniper, so it will find its way.
Yeah.
Okay.
Eventually, like after 10 minutes of processing.
How many security filters can it go through?
Yep. Yeah, and if you ever miss either a Twitch stream or this call, you know, just again bookmark the NRE Labs YouTube channel, and they should appear there within about a day. All right. So we have 2 more minutes. I just want to recap the action items fairly quickly. So Matt is going to, within the week, clean up his Google Doc there and post it in an accessible format for all to see and review and comment on and so forth and so on.
What? Just curious. What does everybody want that format to be in? Just curious. Like, would it be best to like put it in a PR, somehow convert it to like like Markdown and put it in a PR, and that way people can relieve, you know, put comments on there. The thing I like about Google Docs is that you can comment on individual lines and like have all that context preserved. But there are other ways.
Google Docs is there are all kinds of permission issues, so let's just not do that.
So what else? What else can we use that does that kind of thing?
Wikis are good as well.
It looks like the meeting agenda is in a wiki page of the discourse form. So may that be suitable?
That work, Matt?
Yeah, maybe. I don't. The formatting there isn't amazing for like doc. You know, this kind of a planning doc. Yeah, I don't know.
Can you post like a Word doc to the wiki, and then people can comment on it?
Yeah, sure. Yeah, totally. I mean, we can do that. I mean, people can comment. They won't be able to comment in the doc, obviously, because you know, that's not shared. It's not, you know, it's not like everybody's editing the same doc. They all have their own copies. But we can certainly post it as a doc in the community site.
And then people can comment on that document.
Yeah, they'll just have to make sure they provide enough context to know where what they're commenting about. Is all. But that's doable.
All right. Okay, so Matt's gonna publish that. Matt is going to get together with
Charlie. It's Charlie.
I'm sorry, what's that?
Charlie is my name.
Charlie, thank you.
No worries.
Matt's going to get together with Charlie to talk about how to post documentation to the docs repo. He's going to record that call and also publish that call. And at some point, we might even, you know, create that in a text form as well. We have a set of priorities around documentation needs, and also Olivier would like the syringe diagram posted to the documentation as well. All right. All right. So we are at the top of the hour. So thank you everybody for joining. Hope this has been helpful, and you know where to find us between now and next week, and we'll look forward to talking more live next week.
Thank you, everybody.
Thanks, everybody.
Bye-bye.
Bye.
Thank you.